Hello there, how are ya? Welcome back to How I Did It. Today's video is how I installed a third function on my 2601 Kabota tractor. This was a really cool project, very frustrating project, not for putting the third thumb on, but for simply trying to get the rear tire on. Apparently the paint was wet when they put the tire on, and that thing was just sealed on like no tomorrow. So I ordered this from my Kabota dealer up out of Pennsylvania. It's a Land Pride third function kit, and the directions are kind of hinky and pictures are limited. A lot of it's trial by fire. Even here, there was so much paint on the frame of the Kabota. I had to chip paint before I could even start mounting the third function valve right there on it. It was nuts, totally nuts. But got it done, and as far as that rear tire goes, I'm telling you what, if it hadn't been for my neighbor, I don't think I would have ever gotten it off. Thank goodness he stopped by. He ended up going back to his house, getting a bunch of tools, and came back and actually helped me get that doggone thing off. Alrighty then, so let's stay focused here, right? So the first thing that you do is you mount your bracket. Everybody's tractor and every kit is just maybe a smidge different, and this had some parts that did not work at all on the Kabota. I actually ended up having to go to Napa to get the correct quick disconnect, male and female. Here's us trying to get this bloody tire off. Actually, this was me starting to try to get the bloody tire off, and then he had ran back to his house and got some more pry bars and whatnot.
Did it move at all? I mean, I am doing full. No?
So we were trying to keep from busting the seal or the bead right there on the edge of the tire. I'm telling you what, no exaggeration, I would be willing to bet this probably took a good 3 hours to finally get this to break free.
That sounded good.
It moved that time, I think.
Nice.
Shout out and kudos to my neighbor Randy. Oh my goodness, bailed me out big time on this for sure. And then I was so excited to have the tire off, I forgot to show you where one of the fittings goes on the inside of there.
Remove the seat. Make it easy.
Definitely removing the seat makes it much easier to get these hoses and fittings put on underneath the seat.
Oh, everything's so tight on this. It's crazy.
Remember, a picture's worth 1,000 words. Before you unplug those electrical wires, make sure you take a picture of which direction they go.
Okay, guys, so here's the deal. I had to remove the seat. They say you can reach underneath it. Nonsense. I removed the seat. This valve right here, they gave me two different valves that would fit it. One was this elbowed one, and one was this straight up and down one. The straight up and down one would not allow, with the hose in there, the seat to sit back down on here. So what I opted to do was to put the elbow one in there. Here's the problem with the elbow. The tip was flared like this one to go into the hose, and where it sat when it came around, it was this blade width right here, like where the flare's at, too long. It would not make that turn. So what I opted to do I took my grinder wheel and I cut it off right at this mark of the flare, and then I used the grinder wheel to put a flare back on it. I ended up wrapping it 4 times with Teflon tape. I used Teflon putty with the Teflon tape and the Teflon putty, and getting it, put down, cranked down on there pretty good, that I had no leaks. So, and when I first started it, it was leaking out of the bottom of the hose, and as you can see, it's, other than the oil residual left over. Now, I'm not saying it's not going to leak later on, but as far as I can tell right now, it's not leaking. The only other way would be to saw part of the engine block out right here, maybe use the grinder and cut that. I opted to try this first, and if for some reason this leaks, this little MacGyver thing that I did here, then I'll go ahead and purchase another elbow. I'll end up using my grinder and cutting this out right here so it can actually make that turn.
And guys, that was not the engine block, that was that transmission in there. And where this red arrow's at is where the other elbow went. And the other elbow was a different size than the one that went on underneath the seat. So, just to clarify there.
And there's a separate lever that...
Yeah, it actually goes under and it wires onto the handle.
What's pretty cool is I put this third function valve on right here. I pulled the handle off the little lever to raise and lower the bucket and whatnot. And then when I went and put the third function handle on that has the buttons to open and close, like my grapple on the front end of this, it just had a couple of set screws that actually held it in place. Pretty ingenious little setup.
And this is all for later, so I probably should get all this snug down.
Yeah.
Z bracket. It connects onto the third function. You can connect it this way to where the Z is backwards. The only problem is it moved that third function too far over where it interfered with my handle here and my handle down here. So I opted to put it on this way, and it worked just fine.
The directions were actually calling for it to be mounted the other way. That's why I went through that explanation. The other thing here too, the flare goes into the hole, and this flat threaded portion of these fittings actually goes up into the function here. And then once you get your hose on and get it set, then you'll use the, I'll call it a set bolt. It'll set up and just lock everything down super tight to where you won't have any leaks from here. Also, right above where the quick connects are at for the hoses that go up to the grapple, I didn't show putting those hoses on. It was pretty self-explanatory, putting them on and then just doing the quick connecting them. That was probably the easiest portion of this. Like I said, the tire, oh my goodness, that was the worst. And there's that little locking nut that I was talking about. Now I did mark this, the P and the T, just so I wouldn't end up putting the hoses on the wrong inlet/outlet. And then there's just a quick view, the hoses quick connect on the front, ran them along the edge, put a couple of zip ties on them to temporarily hold them. These were the fittings that came from the dealer. The fittings did not work, they leaked. The fittings also were the wrong size for my grapple. So thank goodness, off to Napa I went, got the right thing, came back. I just opted to not put this black bracket on for the time being. Eventually I will. I don't want them just free floating out there, and it worked just fine, as you will see. So now it's time to go ahead and get into doing the electrical. The electrical's actually pretty straightforward, and believe it or not, the directions were pretty good. The 2 red wires go to your power source. Make sure you use the fuse and fuse them. And then the black wire and the white wire are going to connect into the 2 black wires coming off of the 3rd function handle portion. Another quick tip, when you put this handle on, it'll have an outer sheath on it. Put it on, get your mark, pull it back, pull the wire back out, and take the sheathing off of these wires instead of doing it the way that I did it. I fed it down in there. And then I was up underneath there with a pair of scissors trying to get this sheathing off, and it's one of those kind of like the Chinese finger gel things. You know how you put your fingers in and then you pull on them and you couldn't get them off, it locked it? Well, that's kind of what this protective coating was like. So bring it down in there, get your mark on where you're going to send your red wires one direction, your black wires will go to the front to actually tie into that 3rd function valve. It'll make it so much easier than being underneath with a pair of scissors trying to get this thing cut off and potentially damaging your wire. Fortunately I didn't, but that did cross my mind. Didn't keep me from being a dork and just laying under there and wrestling with it. Alright, my tractor, this B2601, it actually came with the auxiliary power source, also known as a cigarette lighter. So what I did was I popped this little tray out, and it did just pop out. One side has longer tabs on it than the other, so pop it out and then
not registering any
figure
power.
out where your power source is.
Now,
And the rest of it is pretty doggone easy.
Key is on.
I'm talking myself through it so I don't end up messing it up.
I'm assuming black is hot. This yellow is going to be your ground. And with the key on, oh, actually that's opposite. So yellow is hot and black is ground. Alright, so I can tie into 3rd function to this keyed source right here on my auxiliary. So in theory, you can see the dash. Yep, see the dash. So the power's on. So I'm going to take my 2 reds, put them back on that positive on the auxiliary plug. When I hit the buttons up here, this should light up showing me that I have power. I don't have a grapple on the front or anything to move it. But can you see that light? Top is showing.
I tried to do
here,
the screen
bottom
in
is
screen
showing
for
here.
y'all so you could actually see the reflection on the black shroud. There are 2 little LED lights. The nice part is this valve was working. Because there was no grapple, it wasn't going to test the hose lines going
Black
from
wires go
the
forward,
valve
red wires go to the back.
to the front grapple. But it would complete the circuit, so I could verify under my seat there was no leaks there. Where the tire was going to go back on, where I had to tap in there with the other elbow, there were no leaks. And mind you, both of those elbows were 2 different sizes. So there was no putting parts on where they did not belong. It was pretty it actually was pretty ingenious the way that was set up as far as that goes. It just was a bummer that a couple of the parts they sent were basically not the correct part whatsoever and useless. And then again, the quick connects were real small. I ended up just going up to Napa.
Alright, so what
And
I
they hooked
did
me
was
up.
I spliced in the fuse into the 2 red wires that come off of the valve, which leaves 1 wire left over. this wire I'm going to plug in to the positive on the auxiliary, or this cigarette lighter, however you want to look at it, which is key operated. That way the thumb won't operate unless the actual power is on, so there's no accidental pinching anybody.
I ended up pulling a few screws to move this black shroud out around the shifter. That way it would make it easy for me to feed those wires back up and keep them from being any place that they may get pinched or damaged. And then it was just a matter of getting things plugged in and put back together. Top off the fluid. You got to remember you got a couple extra hose there, and when you undo the bolts and put your hoses under the seat and on that one side with the tire, you know you're going to lose a little bit of fluid. You don't lose a lot. And then use the paper towel trick to check the level when it's good. Go ahead and clean everything up, put the cap on, and take it out for a test drive. And there's our girl Stella. Just so you know, I'm finishing this video up. Stella is at day 52 of her pregnancy. We are on the countdown. The average pregnancy for a pup is 60 days, plus or minus 5. Alrighty then, I want to thank you all for stopping by. Have a wonderful and blessed day. I'll see you next time on How I Did It.